With my last playthrough of Elden Ring, I finally achieved a goal I'd failed at many times over the years. I beat the game without using Spirit Ashes. Hold your applause, this isn't a flex or a judgment that is a requirement to really beat the game or anything like that. It's just something I've never been able to pull off, and I finally have now. This is important to me not because it lets me feel like less of a scrub that can now avoid feeling shame. Like any well-adjusted adult, I always feel a healthy amount of shame, but because I don't like using Spirit Ashes. I just use them constantly every single other time I played the game, despite not enjoying the experience with them. Obviously, people can like what they like. If you find using the ashes the most fun thing in the world, that's totally fine. I'm not trying to dog anyone here, but for me, the fights where I use them are basically always terrible. Not in an abstracted sense of failure or copying out shame type of way, I just think they make for extremely uninteresting fights. They reduce every encounter into a dull sequence of unimpeded ass slapping as the boss ignores you. The fights effectively no longer exist. Given I was expecting to fail at staying summon free this run, all playthrough I had been planning to do a video about why I keep doing this to myself. I had expected the answer to be a nice and simple, it's hard and I'm bad, but that all fell apart when I finally got through it, and honestly, without all that much trouble. Was I finally good at the game? Had I been ruining Elden Ring baselessly for years? Well, no. I broke it just as badly as Ashes just without using them, so instead of being about Ashes specifically, I now have a new question. Why do I never play Elden Ring in fun ways? This time around, I came up with an extremely simple build that almost certainly has been discussed before, but I didn't look anything up for it, so I'm calling it mine. Basically, I tried a bleed build a while back, and my experience was that the first two status procs would happen very quickly, while the third one would be dramatically harder to get. Because the first two would put the boss into the usually much harder phase 2, I'd have these fights where I'd blitz phase 1 in about 15 seconds, and then get destroyed for the rest of the encounter as I struggled to land enough hits against a much harder enemy without the aid of steady bonus damage. It was powerful, but it did not stack up to the power of Mimic. My solution this time was to spread my status damage around. Instead of speccing hard into a single one and trying to brute force a triple or quadruple proc, I made a broad spectrum status hell machine and chased the easy and cheap early doses and avoided the ever increasing resistances bosses gain after each instance. This resulted in a cold infused rot rapier and bleed thrusting sword combo, which when paired with the heftiest shield I could find, let me walk up and post an endless torrent of infection into the enemy while I mostly ignored everything. Sure, bleed is the best effect per proc, but in the time it would take me to get 3 bleeds in a fight, I could get 2 bleeds, 2 frosts, and a rot, giving me noticeably more percentage-based damage in a similar number of hits. And I could do it without needing to attempt risky weapon arts for more build-up efficiency. It's stunningly effective. It's easily the most broad-use build approach I've used, and by far the easiest, safest, least talisman and buff-reliant thing I've encountered. Hell, given all the damages from statuses, you really only need the strength to hold a shield for it to work, since your direct damage is so meaningless, so it even works at surprisingly low levels. There's like 3 bosses in the entire game that it doesn't work on, and in hindsight, I never actually tried full brain off of Melania, so I assumed that she'd out-heal the damage through the shield, but looking back now, after how this thing handled the DLC, I'm not so sure anymore. While I did feel clever for recognizing this very simple concept and seeing it blossom, it's not very fun to actually play. You hold L1 and mash R1. Once or twice you'll hit right on the D-pad. There's next to no reactive or strategic play involved. It's 90 seconds of menial labor. By doing this instead of using summons, I was simply swapping one form of broken non-fun for a different form of broken non-fun, seemingly in a targeted quest to never engage the game in ways that I enjoy playing other From games in. I want to figure out why I keep doing that. I'm mad because I'm bad. Okay, so yeah, we could just finish the video now and say that I find the game too hard and I need to break it to be able to make any progress and not look into it any deeper, since at the core of it, that's what's happening. But we're going to dig in a little bit more than that. First off, I want to cover how I've enjoyed playing these games through to here. I'm not amazing at these, and I'm aware of that, but I'm not remotely interested in becoming amazing at them. As I said in the Bloodborne side video, I generally feel like I want to be able to get by with about a 6 or 7 out of 10 performance, and feel like an absolute badass if I get up to an 8. For the series up until here, there's been no playstyle more 6 out of 10 performance friendly than a medium shield, medium weapon, half dodge playstyle. I like to get in and amongst it, but there's no world where I'm understanding every boss's moveset enough and then executing well enough that I can run in two-handed and make the 45 successive correct dodges I'd need to win shieldless. Nor am I accurate or reactive enough to differentiate between big windows and small windows fast enough to treat them differently. So I'm not going to be taking in a colossal weapon and only acting on the big windows, while often I'm not going to be confident enough to grab the quick extra swings in the middle of chaos smaller weapons can utilize. At this extremely moderate level of skill, this generic biggest sword and board playstyle is the perfect fit for me. I dodge what I read and I block what I don't. I hit fast enough that I don't need special windows, but hard enough that I don't need to string combos or pinch cheap hits while the enemy is still swinging at me. It's all very simple and aggressive, and I find it extremely fun. This approach works just fine with almost everything in the prior games. Absolutely, there are a few things that get in the way. There are a couple of bosses requiring a lot of memorization, like the Nameless King or Elden, which have a high floor of understanding to be playable. Obviously, Bloodborne has no shields, but that one replaces blocking with extremely generous positioning-based safety windows and more easily spam dodging. Outside of that, this fairly sloppy, direct approach works fairly well, with fights usually depending on learning a couple of key attacks, while everything else just kind of skates by on instinct. I like the brawl. I want to throw down in a mad scrap with an enemy who can scrap just as hard. I'm not overly interested in mastery or pure skill expression, just enough to give me some real stakes and pressure. Elden Ring hates me playing like this. Or it really loves me playing like that but thinks I'm a Twitch streamer who's going to play the game for 4,000 hours to be able to do it well. One of those two. And that's fine. Elden Ring isn't Dark Souls, and doesn't need to reward the same playstyles. In fact, I'd say it's a developer's job to funnel people away from the path of least resistance into where they've built their fun if it isn't the most obvious thing to do. A good example of this is Octopath Traveler. It's a turn-based JRPG, which usually inspires a bunch of lazy attack spamming and spot healing, which is actually something I love in that type of game. I find it very satisfying to absentmindedly mash X for a few days and watch numbers go up. It's one of my favorite kick-back and relax game styles. But Octopath doesn't want me to do that. It has an elaborate breaking and move order manipulation system, so they go out of their way to add in a bunch of team wipes to strong-arm the player into engaging with the system properly. They took away a playstyle I like, so that I'd engage with a less natural one that is a heap of fun. Dark Souls itself is an example of this mindset in motion. The obvious and brain-dead approach to playing a game like this is to run up and start button mashing. Dark Souls would be a terrible button mashing action game. You have 2 attack buttons, and enemies take 3 minutes to take a swing. The fun is learning the tells and dodging and countering each thing as it comes with understanding and timing. The high damage is there to push you into engaging with it properly in service of a much better experience. I've always been against easy mode in Dark Souls for this reason. It's not going to impact me directly since I don't need it, but negatively impact the people who think that they want it. I'm looking out for you guys. Some examples of games that I think do this really badly would be the new Legend of Zeldas. They have these intricate physics and mechanical combinations which can be combined in very creative and inventive ways. But smacking stuff in melee does several times the damage with no prep work, and you have infinite pause healing. The obvious, dumb, and lazy method is extremely efficient, and the interesting model becomes wholly opt-in. Instead of nudging players towards the fun and creative stuff, they're effectively punished since it's a harder, slower, and more thought-intensive way of handling threats. In the case of Elden Ring, they've successfully disincentivized my first thought headlong rampage, but I can't figure out what's meant to be the fun thing that I change to. Obviously, they do want me to adapt my playstyle, but what's the big reward I get for adapting? I think the idea is that in pure melee, you drop the R1s and you move into charge heavy chasing or weapon art spam. And indeed for the fights that I'm good enough to play that way, it is very enjoyable. But playing like that requires a really solid understanding of the boss before it works and the patience of a saint. The fun is there if you can get really good at it. I have done immediate Margit in the past, and I did enjoy that eventual victorious mastery run, but I didn't enjoy the 25 failed attempts before it got close enough to be exciting. To me, that minutes of more skillful pleasure is not worth the hours of frustration in getting to that point. So it's never been harder to get good, but if it's not fun for you to get to that point, or if you never do, obviously you'll need to approach the game in one of the different, easier manners that it provides. This is where the problems sit in for me. What are the options that you're being funneled into? Using a free summon to take all the aggro and skip the fight? Or making some kind of crazy nuke build, or in my case, impenetrable tank build, to again, skip the fight? Elden Ring operates in 2 extremes. Master level skill exam, and baby with missing fingers. The whole region in the middle which I find fun is gone, and I can't find much enjoyment in the places my low skill level allows me to access. Ironically, the high difficulty pushed me back into the face-tanking stupidity that the series originally implemented the high difficulty to stop. In the background, I've been playing some footage of a for fun setup I had tried out versus Midra. Sure, it's still got a big shield, but no pokes and no statuses, so to actually do anything, I need to put myself at risk and stop hiding. It's a brawling set, and it's pretty fun to use. As you can see, Midra is kicking my ass. Obviously, I am terrible. I only recognize half the moves and have the correct response internalized for half the time with those. And I don't know how to use my weapon art because I didn't practice at all. In short, I'm bad, but that's beside the point. Clearly, he's asking a lot of me, and clearly I still have many, many more tries and lessons ahead of me before I can provide that. So this is my first attempt with the poke build. I would go get back here with the summon to show that too, since it would be about as easy as this, if not even easier. I mean, I could have 2 of this build going at once, but that'd take like 80 hours and I don't wanna. The point here is that playing in a way which is much more active and fun is clearly magnitudes harder than any of those extremely easy and obvious, unsatisfying workarounds. I don't know of any way to make something in the middle. I was going to go into a whole bit about all the ways the combat is different to explain how the game pushes me into these places, but it was all pretty dry and long-winded, so I'm just going to jump into what I think is the unifying issue. Sure, there's lots more delay attacks and more elaborate combos, and the heal punishing has never been more, well, punishing, but you can see just from looking at a few seconds of a fight with Fume Knight, an ultra boss from Dark Souls 2, and one with Margit, the first story boss of Elden Ring, the difference is self-explanatory, and ain't nobody got time for that. And honestly, it's not inherently an issue if it wasn't for my primary complaint. The lethality is too damn high. Everything hits crazy hard and there aren't many options to mitigate that. Healing is slow and most bosses have arena-spanning heal punishes. It's extremely rare to die because you ran out of flasks. Most deaths are instant deletions while you still have a massive stack of heals left in reserve. The intensity of the movesets isn't unfair or impossible to manage. In isolation, it's exciting and fun with more spectacle than ever, but mistakes are punished super brutally given how much more likely they are. You die in Dark Souls, Elden Ring kills you. Sure, these are famously difficult games, but none of them have ever been this quick to kill you this often. I mean, it's not as bad as the Cursed Chalices in Bloodborne, in terms of one-shots, but if that's all I have to use as an example of going further, things may have gone a little bit too far. This is why I haven't bothered going super in-depth into how hard to dodge or relentless the attacks are, because while it goes further than Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne, those games are still pretty aggressive and high tempo, and on occasion would ask quite a lot of the player. What's changed is that those ones let you get hit. No hitting Orphan of Cause is probably still one of the hardest things you could do in one of these games, but merely winning the fight simply asks you to beat him while being hit less than like 30 times. As the mechanics got harder, From let you get away with more errors, but not here. Many snappy little rhetorical statements which exist to get a general vibe across have been applied to the Souls series over the years. A good example is one which is faded by the wayside, since the levels in these games haven't kept pace with the boss difficulty creep. There used to be a lot of rhetoric about how it was so great that Souls levels didn't screw around. The pressure was always up, because everything could kill you. It got the point across pretty well that there was more thought and effort getting through a Demon Souls level compared to the trash mobs of like, a Dynasty Warriors one, but the statement itself was not literally accurate. The games were absolutely bursting with harmless trash mobs and relaxed, easier sections. It was a handy shorthand talking point, and you can intuit what it's saying, but when games did take that to heart literally, such as the Surge when almost everything can actually kill you, people complained that it was cheap, unfair, and unfun. The rhetoric passes the vibe check, but it isn't really accurate when taken at face value. I bring this up because I think the joy of overcoming is dramatically overstated when people talk about Souls experiences. You always hear about people finding things so overwhelming and beating their head against the wall for hours and they finally break through it and they feel incredible. And I don't know, man. Did you? Did you really? I don't believe you spent hours beating the Belfry gargoyles. People tend to talk about challenge satisfaction like it's a linear scale. The more failure, the sweeter the eventual victory. For me at least though, I'd say it's more of a single cycle sine wave. Absolutely, there is something gained from not breezing through it the first time. Maria dropped off my favourite boss ever pedestal for me in this series because she was just a bit too easy. But for me, it builds for a few tries, then quickly becomes obnoxious, and my victory is an annoyed, thank God that's over, with no real satisfaction. Sure, there are some spikes in all of the games, but in my experience, almost any boss takes under 5 attempts to clear, and that's being pessimistic. The statement still has some value as a vibe check, as it does accurately suggest that you're not expecting to steamroll your way to victory all the time, but the fabled difficulty wall, which actually bogs you down for an extended period, is really rare. Because of course it bloody is. If everyone was taking hours to beat most of the bosses, the games would take 200 hours to complete, and they wouldn't have any mass appeal to anyone bar masochists. It's been like 15 minutes of video, and I still haven't fired up Excel, so here's a little chart of every boss that's taken me something in the vicinity of 10 or so tries to beat in any playthrough I've had over the years. Some of these were only hard once, some stayed that way. All that really matters is that at some point I spent at least the better part of an hour on them. Obviously, not everyone is going to have the same experience at me, but I'm not very good, so I don't imagine many would be looking at a list much worse than that. I refuse to believe that anyone is dying to Murgo's wet nurse for an entire afternoon. Now, let's add Elden Ring to that chart. Well, goddamn, that's a lot. It's barely behind the entire series before it. Obviously, most of the filler stuff is easy, so it's not a super huge percentage of the bosses overall, but it is a sizable chunk of the major bosses. Elden Ring has made that I had to bash my head against the wall until I eventually succeeded after hours story much more of a reality than any point in the whole series for me, and I just don't like it. But hey, maybe I was just playing those games in really OP ways. Obviously, in all these runs, I've done everything, so I've been higher leveled than what many people would be. So of course, all those other games went fairly easily. And this is true. I was quite strong. I like seeing numbers go up, and I don't cap my levels or gear, so I absolutely had the option to tone the damage down. The thing is, Elden Ring is by far the most overleveled I got in any of these things, and it still wrecks me like nothing else. 100% run with the DLC here is going to put you well into the 200s without grinding a single frogman. Even with that, I can't tone Elden Ring down to somewhere where I'm comfortable and happy. I think there's two factors in this. Number one is just that Elden Ring isn't Dark Souls, so maybe they just wanted to have an entirely different experience. There's the story context argument that these are meant to be gods that are beyond the reach of mere mortals. Well, resurrecting semi-mortals. So, if you want that to be the main focus, it makes sense to make them unplayable nightmares which most people would need to resort to underhanded skullduggery to defeat. It's a very reasonable conceit for a good story, but it seems like a stupid way to build a game that's meant to be fun. It is a plausible thought though, I guess. I have no counter to this argument at any rate. If they want to remove the scrappy underdog wins the fistfight dynamic for lore, so be it. However, I'm not convinced that's what's actually going on here. More likely to me is just that the game is really long and they couldn't be bothered adapting the leveling system very much. I feel like this is the most likely option because it basically works like normal until you get up to the snowy regions, which playtime-wise is about when every other game would have finished. Sure, Margit is a hell of a barrier to entry who is likely to be an early wall, since he's not really very viable until you've played for a few hours, but between there and Morgott, it pretty much flows at normal From pace. I'm sure if you're watching this, you've played enough Souls to know how From leveling works, but just in case, the main things I'm talking about here are hard caps and expected total level. From has a complicated relationship with power leveling. Obviously their games have a lot of stats that all go up one at a time, so they kind of invite a lot of leveling up compared to most RPGs. Your level cap in these things isn't 30, 60, or even 100, it's between 5 and 900 in any given game. With so many levels available, it makes sense that they don't want players getting bogged down trying to grind 600 million souls to try and get maximum health. So they implemented a soft cap system where each stat has a breakpoint where their effectiveness drops off dramatically. The exact breakpoints vary from game to game and stat to stat, but a solid rule of thumb is that a stat will usually go up very quickly until level 40, then increase at a less impressive but still noticeable rate up until 60, and then will be practically irrelevant past there. These points of diminishing returns make the progression gates a lot more reasonable and approachable in the space of regular gameplay. Most players will finish their natural playthroughs across the series somewhere between level 80 and 125 depending on game length. So if you were putting 90 levels into any one, that would make the builds lopsided as hell or invite a lot of grinding. Instead, the game seemed to be largely scaled around 40 for most things. 40 health levels will keep damage manageable, 40 equip load levels will let you carry big weapons or wear some fairly beefy gear, 40 in your damage stats will usually kill things pretty fast. This is pretty explicitly shown by the level requirements for weapons and spells, which will usually be within that 40 or under limit for a solid 95% of the content in the game. This means that you've got a little bit of flexibility to min-max a little at not a whole lot of cost, and lets people struggling stretch a little bit further. It's a good system. Leveling anything past 60 to maximum only results in about a 13% improvement to any stat, so just don't do that. But if you're under there, reaching that cap is always viable. One common recommendation to people having a hard time in these games has often been to take stock, go grab a few levels, and come back later. No, they're not games where you need to grind, but they offer value if you do a bit of it. So anyway, here's a late game magma worm hitting me with 59 vigor, a defense flask, the highest defense talisman in the base game, and a 10% damage reduction from a buff. Jesus Christ. I have about 85% of my maximum potential life here. This is a hard hit for sure, but it's not that wild for endgame. My first playthrough I went in with a standard leveling model and found myself getting one-shot by things like the dragon at the start of Farum Azula, and generally just had a very rough time until I went off and leveled. The minimum expectation level has been bumped up to the full 60 now. This is a lesson that isn't that hard to learn. I haven't gone into the late game at under 50 vigor since that first attempt, but it means that there's nowhere to go if you're not handling it. Here's a little chart of the Bloodborne vitality gain per level. 30 is enough to handle Bloodborne, which offers 1100 HP. A fairly meta target of 40 gives a 223 point or 20% boost up to 1323 HP. This is about where the game expects people to be at the endgame. There aren't any bosses going around doing 1200 damage per hit, so that extra health does actually gain you noticeable survivability. Going a bit greedy with it and going up to our hard cap of 50 gives us a nice even 1500 HP, a solid 13% increase in just 10 levels. After this, it slows up though, with the remaining sets providing under 100 health per more expensive set of 10 levels. Still, from that basically expected 40 vitality, you can get another 13% from 10 levels, or 20% from 20. If we went crazy and doubled the expected level up to 80, you've gained over 38% total health. This is a pretty insane investment, but it is a very noticeable increase. Now with us previously establishing that you're meant to be at 60 by the end of Elden Ring, since you're still in the one-shot range from time to time at 50, let's have a gander at the growth potential you've got left. If you're at 60, you have 1900 HP. At 99, you have 2100. That's a mere 13% from a whopping 40 levels. That's not really enough to shift the needle much, and at this point counts as tens of millions of runes. And as you saw with that magma worm, yeah, stuff is going to be hitting at over 1500. So that's the problem painstakingly explained. Now we can have a deeper look at how they've tried to solve it. Spirit Ashes are not easy mode. Back in my Dark Souls video, I initially started fighting Artorias with a somewhat goofy Life Hunt scythe build that was sorta working, but I did die a couple of times. Sadly, on my way back after one of those, I managed to absent-mindedly fall off the bridge while doing the run back, so as such, I lost all the souls I gained clearing the whole level and got grumpy, so I took out my rage by swapping in a more defensively sound build, and honestly, I overcooked it. In hindsight, I should have capped out at Tarkus or Black Knight gear and not made him this easy, but it is what it is. The thing is, despite completely trivializing through the power of gear, I still had to fight him. He was still doing all of his attacks and I still had to deal with them as they came at me. I still had to hit him during actual attack windows. Sure, it didn't matter half as much if I screwed up on my dodges and I could heal trade a bit, but by and large, the fight was still the fight. Just much, much easier. This is what an easy mode is. It's the same game, but easier. If I'm playing Doom and I put the difficulty way down, It doesn't turn the demons into Girl Scouts offering me cookies, or make them pull out iPads and get distracted playing Among Us with each other. It just makes them do less damage and die quicker. It's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a mode that is easier, not a mode that is a different, coincidentally easier game. This is why I say that Spirit Ashes are not easy mode, they are skip mode. They don't make all that crazy damage more manageable so you can trade a little bit better when missing the tight windows or get away with screwing up your elaborate 9 successive dodge sequence. They just turn the fight off. Instead of making the encounter easier, they just make the encounter happen to someone else and you just get to drop all your nukes on it while it's looking the other way. Sure, you'll win, and if we're in some binary idiot world where that's the only thing that's considered, fine, it's successful. A skip to credits button would work too. I want the boss to still do all the same crap to me, I just want it to be less lethal so I can enjoy myself. Turning it into an unimpeded butt slapping is not an improvement beyond letting me progress further. This leaves me in a horrible situation where I have 2 options at my thoroughly mediocre skill level, and I don't like either of them. I can grind bosses for hours having a horrible time until I eventually get extremely good, or skip the bosses with summons or broken nuke builds and have a horrible time. These things do not function as an easy mode to tone the first option down to something I enjoy. Now don't get me wrong, I don't want a general easy mode in Souls. One thing I love about RPGs is that they put this dynamic into the game itself. There's something unsatisfying about tying it to a button in an abstracted menu, and it can create confusion as games rise and fall in difficulty across their playtime, since you might nullify or magnify those moments in an opportune menu choice timing completely by chance. By putting the difficulty sliders into in-game systems instead, you still feel like you've earned that easy mode either through hard work or clever thinking. Sure, I made that Altorius pretty simple, but god damn it, I had to go get Havel's gear, invest a whole bunch into equip load, and tactically sacrifice a ring slot to do it. In a way, I earned that steamroll. This is kinda relaxed for me in recent years as the spectacle has increased so much over the last gen that you totally could get away with it being a brain-dead button masher at this point. I don't want that, I still like being pushed to solve my problems and feel my character growth, but you could do it now and it'd still be aesthetically pleasing enough to work. At any rate, I guess I shouldn't just complain all the time, so let's pitch some solutions as a fun thought exercise. I've come up with 4 ideas to provide the experience that I enjoy so much from the series. I'm going to put them in order of increasing spiciness, but I want to clarify that my one rule here is that I cannot impact the experience of people who do like it as is. So I can't edit movesets, and I can't tinker with existing boss stats. The people who like mastering things deserve to have their experience that demands it. The people who like using summons can still have their summons. Hell, by using these ideas, I think you could push things even harder as a default, thus further rewarding the Lobos Juniors of the world. Make the games inhumanly difficult, and just let people opt into management systems. Go nuts with it. I'm not your dad. Number 1. Armor upgrades. The first one that comes to mind feels like the easiest and most simple addition, because they even had it in the past. Dark Souls 1 had the option to upgrade gear. It didn't do a whole lot, and everyone trying to move through the game somewhat quickly just ignored it, but it was there, and it could absolutely be an option. Given it's something that they've had before and it didn't ruin the flow for everyone else, it feels like a safe suggestion. With how massively far away from comfort I am with Elden Ring, my idea is to make it more impactful, but also way more of a pain in the ass. 5 or 10% damage reduction probably isn't going to do it for me. That's the difference between getting 2-shot by a lot, or just 2-shot. It's effectively nothing. Letting my armor go up to 25%, or screw it, 50% would definitely have my comfort zone somewhere in there. Obviously, that high end is pretty overpowered and could break things pretty easily, so in that spirit of wanting to make people who use it feel like they've earned their easy mode, and not tempting people who don't want it or need it into nerfing their game without trying, I really want the process to suck. Make it cost 1,000,000 damn souls to level out a single armor piece. Make it have reverse soft cap so you don't get big games until you're spending high-end stones. Hell, make the armorer be a specific person and sit them somewhere annoying to get to and don't put a grace near it. Sit him in the damn lake of rot and put 4 Crucible Knights in his room. If you're upgrading gear, I want you actively opting in out of desperation. You've got to earn those massive defense gains. Number 2. Remove the level caps. With the easy one out of the way, let's get a little bit bolder with one that I'm less sold on myself, even though I'm the one pitching it. Let's remove those hard caps. Now don't get me wrong, it would absolutely work for my needs, but I'm less confident about it passing my don't change things for people who enjoy the game as is rule. On a basic level, it's a very simple idea of letting the gains keep on rolling past 60 and wiping our hands of it. Now people can just do a little bit of grinding and get their power levels up to a comfortable level. Problem solved, easy peasy. Other than the fact that I think that this could mess with people who are already comfortable with where it is. I'm concerned this would disincentivize build variety. Why invest a few levels into getting access to buffs if you could gain just as much power just by continuing to pump your natural scalings? Similarly, if you're right at the perfect skill level where the difficulty hits just right, you could ruin it pretty easily with just a few lazy, loose stat allocations. There could be some value in doing a horseshoe stat curve where the biggest gains are at the beginning and end. Then you might end up with PvPers doing crazy stuff like trying to get by with 150 levels but 99 in a single stat, but I couldn't even imagine all the possible blowbacks. Hell, even for the power levelers, in a lot of ways it'd make it a bit worse, since now you need to focus your stats down even more to get power out of them. So yeah, don't do this one. Yes, it was my idea, but it turns out that I don't like it. I just wanted to bring it up because it's an obvious idea which doesn't hold up when you think about it. Instead, I want us to think about the spiciest, most unpopular idea that I can think of that I actually think might be the very best one. Number 3. Bring back adaptability. I may have ruined the wackiness of this idea in the thumbnail because, hey, eye-catching rage baiting is what the algorithm craves, but I'm not screwing around here. I think this is the perfect solution. Now, it must be said that I do mean a heavily modified adaptability. Priority 1 is not including dodge iframes in it. That's obviously stupid as hell. And secondly, have it do literally nothing until level 20, so every starting class begins with the same functionality that we already have. With those two major drawbacks preemptively covered, we can start seeing how it works. One thing I've mentioned in passing a few times is the notion of how tight healing windows can be, given how high the damage is. In theory, you have like a dozen heals to give you a decent total of survivability, but in function, this is often cut in half since you'll get hit while the animation is playing. I actually like the teleporting quick blast input reading heal punishes. Dodge to heal is fun, so I'm all for punishing backing off. However, dodge to heal is also quite a bit harder in this one with the short recovery times bosses have. My idea is that by adding adaptability, you can shorten your flask animation by a flask or so every few levels, much like what it did in Dark Souls 2, without it impacting the people who are already that switched on to handle it. It would need a sequence of little efficiency gains elsewhere to flesh out the stat overall. Maybe you could cut a frame off your getting up animation, maybe one off your shield stagger or shield raise every now and then. You could maybe even go wild with it and increase buff cast speed or even buff duration to make it more viable to use 30-second buffs if you're not quite good enough to land a dozen hits with it in that time. There's plenty of these little gameplay helpers that could be subtle, but very helpful if invested in. There are a heap of things that I like about this one. It's completely useless for people who don't need it. If you're someone who's keeping to a level cap, you're not going to waste 30 of them on cutting a few frames off your flask speed. For non-cappers, it adds something to invest dump stats in, as leveling past the norm would actually make the game easier now. It gives players an option to impact the mechanical nature of the game without changing it for people who don't need it. What sets this one apart from the first two is that it doesn't impact the earlier stuff too badly. As I've said a few times, the levels haven't kept up with the bosses in terms of difficulty, and most of the slot bosses are pushovers. So one downside of giving us double defense or increased damage output is that the stuff that you can handle becomes even more pathetic and lame. But in this case, it doesn't massively change things. Taking half a second off your heal will make Mesmer a lot more manageable, but it's also not going to make clearing a level much easier since you tend to heal between engagements anyway. It'll make the overlapping chaos of a duo fight less obnoxious, while keeping the simplicity of an ulcerated tree spirit largely unchanged. I genuinely don't see any downside on this one. Number 4. Specialized Talismans. While the last one was pushing it a little bit, my ideas so far have been relatively easy to implement. Basically, you just fiddle with a few number ranges, maybe add in a merchant somewhere, but by and large, they basically run themselves. This one requires quite a bit more game rejigging. In the spirit of not impacting the fights where it's not needed, My last idea is to expand on the Moog Flask idea. One of the gimmicks of that fight is that you'll need to have a special item to downgrade the bleed spamming Nihil attack. I'm suggesting we do this for everything hard. For finishing Millicent's quest, you'd now get a talisman that reduces or removes her regain. Or Garank's quest could reward you with a talisman that nullifies Meliketh's destined death attacks. Killing all the godskins in the game could give you a talisman that slows their respawn rate or whatever in the double fight. Obviously, this idea is a whole big thing. Bosses would need to have gimmicks that could be scaled up and down, so when something is more direct, it's a lot harder to factor that in. The devs would need to decide what's hard enough to deserve it, since it'd be ridiculous to have these available for every single fight. Quests would need to be tinkered with. Entire new effects and items would need to be conceived, created, and implemented. They need to make little icons for all of these single-use items. I guess what I'm saying is that it's not particularly feasible. What I do like about it is that it doesn't impact the game overall, since the upgrades are only useful in these single instances. It also makes the side content more valuable, since rewards will now serve a bigger purpose. I also like that it has some trade-off in that it could plausibly reward players for not doing it. You're giving up a slot that could be used on damage, on survivability. So if you're skillful enough to leave them off, you're rewarded with stronger builds and quicker kills. Overall, this one definitely isn't something I'd ever really expect due to being such a large undertaking. It's more just a fun one to think about. So yeah, with that one covered, I think that I'm done talking about Elden Ring and FromSoft until the next game comes out that's not on Switch. It's been a trip. Before I get into my little conclusion, I just want to interrupt things to thank everyone who watched the last video. 1,600 views is absolutely mind-blowing to me. I was excited when something got past 20 just a few months ago, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I've written stuff which has gotten more views elsewhere, but I don't know, there's something about having my voice on it and this kind of more public-facing platform that's made it feel extra special and personal. So yeah, thank you guys so much. Anywho, back to the topic at hand. I do have concerns that the massive success of the game may result in a continuation of this mindset of giving the sweaties the most brutally difficult thing they've ever done, and then just giving everyone else an outright skip instead of options to just tone it down. I mean, they did it once, and it sold 5 times as much as anything else they've ever done. Why wouldn't you make this the new template for handling challenge? Again, I don't want an easy mode. I don't find easy modes rewarding. But I'd love them to expand the options for controlling the experience from your in-game choices, so I can bring things down to my level while still keeping the fight satisfying. By all means, go in and make it harder than ever to avoid all the hits. But if they're gonna give us easier options, I just hope there's some which make it more forgiving to eat those hits instead of simply removing the threat of those hits entirely. Everyone's had their say on this topic, and now I have too. I tend to see it boil down to a binary feedback loop where people just loop get good and just break it arguments forever, so I hope that I've looked at it with some kind of remotely fresh angle and you've enjoyed hearing my ideas. And if not, sucked in.